Hey guys, my name's Albert and welcome to our Lead the Charge video series. Join me as I chat to industry experts within the EV sector as we cover topics such as fleet, carbon footprint and charging. Now sit back, relax, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have learned at least one thing that you can take away. Thanks Lorna for joining us, really appreciate it. Just to start off with, if you could just share a little bit about your background, how you became involved in the world of EVs and what your current role is and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, hi, great to be here. So background's quite interesting. So we have to go back quite a way. I used to be an IT project manager, kind of got into fleet through that route and telemetry and data and kind of realizing that computers are quite embedded in vehicles these days. So when I was out with colleagues at an event, there was some conversation about CAN bus and everything else. And we got to the end of that meeting, the whole day training session, everything else. And they went, have you any idea what they were talking about? I went, yeah, why? Have you not? So that's suddenly realizing that it's a skill change. It was how you did fleet before wasn't necessarily how you were going to do it going forward. Doesn't mean all those skills have gone, but it just means there's a whole different set of things. So there was an opportunity. Anyway, I ended up falling into fleet through that route, so to speak, and pretty much from day one was looking at alternative vehicles, all sorts of things, right back to the early Modec EV that was out there and some of these others. And the first EV I ever drove was actually the Peugeot Ion van, which doesn't exist anymore. So kind of shows you how far back I was dabbling in this area. And today, actually, I've been in my EV car 3 years. So it's actually having its MOT at the moment.
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you, actually, if you actually owned an EV and what that was. But so what EV have you got, Lorna?
So I'm in a Polestar 2. So had one of the first ones that came out, and I've been in it now for 3 years. We'll be in it a little bit longer, so done 38,000 miles, and I'm still on my original set of tyres. So love it.
Original set of tyres.
So despite my original set of tyres, and actually it was when I came up to Aston Barclay up in Leeds back on November the 8th, I remember the date, or 7th, came up to Aston Barclay Leeds, put my car through your auction machines and everything else, and we tested it and played around it. My tyre tread depths were still 4.9, 5.3, 5.3 and 5.4.
Oh wow. Was that the Michelin day?
It was.
Okay, unfortunately I wasn't there.
Yeah, that was one of those scary moments when, you know, you're meant to be doing your tyre checks all the time, you know you're doing it, but you're still petrified of it going through a machine and being scrutinised by everybody else in that room.
Back into like what you're currently doing. So you gave us a lot about your background, what you have been doing, and your lovely Polestar at the moment. So what are you currently? What's your current role, and what does that look like?
So current role is head of fleet at National Grid. And that's kind of an all-encompassing role. So everything from cars through to the commercial vehicles, even all the own plant that we've got. So the whole journey that I'm on at the moment is transitioning everything to an alternative fuel source, whatever way it can be, whatever the next cleanest alternative is. So some cases that will be, or the majority of cases, it will be electric, but we've explored hydrogen, we've explored all sorts of different options in there as to what we can and can't do based on the fleet that we've got.
And what sort of size fleet are you guys dealing with?
So National Grid in the UK, now that we've purchased Western Power, has 9,000 vehicles in the UK. Wow. And we've got another 9,000 over in the US as well, which most people don't realise.
Wow, I didn't know that for sure.
There you go.
So in terms of your 9,000 vehicles, how many of those are electric? Do you know?
So I need to split that out a little bit into cars and commercial vehicles. So on the car side, which has been pretty easy. So when I joined the company just over 4 years ago, there were no electrics on fleet. And we now have, hang on, just trying to quickly count up the last batch, because we had about 100 a month electric vehicles. So just around, just before Christmas, we were about 1,500 now.
Wow.
Cars
That's amazing.
That are pure electric.
Yeah.
The rest are all hybrids, and we're just washing through some of the last diesels that are on fleet. And then on the commercial side, we've got about 300-400, and we just keep the only reason the number isn't exact is we've got some in production that are due to be coming in, so we're kind of moving vehicles through.
So you got 1,500 that are currently electric. When out of 9,000, how close are you to kind of having like a 50-50 split? And like what's your timeline to kind of?
So on the cars, we're already over 50%.
Okay, awesome.
So we're well there. In fact, we're probably about 70-odd% 100% on the cars already. And in fact, some of those cars as well are coming through for their second life.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is that first person's had it, it's coming to the end of its life, they're now ordering again
Yeah,
for
yeah.
their next vehicle. And considering we've only been on the journey 3-4 years, so we're in that cycle. What I'm not doing is just getting rid of a vehicle for the sake of it. So I do wait until they come to the end of their natural replacement cycle, and then we change the vehicle out.
Next question you kind of already answered really about your personal, like if you own an electric car, but we know you own the Polestar, we know it's in for the MOT, we know it's still on its first set of tyres. A question really was like, what's your personal experience around having an EV? Like, is it something that you're enjoying? Is it something that you love? Like, what's your overall experience that you have with your EV?
Yeah, I love my EV, and it's not just the Polestar that I've driven. So I've done a few rallies in the country as well. So driven an electric transit high roof van from John O'Groats to Land's End. So that was an experience. Mainly because once you get to the M5 and you're heading south, you can't get into any of the service areas because they've all got height restrictions. And so trying to find a charge point when they're behind the height restrictions, because they've been designed for cars only, was a bit of a challenge. But it was great. I loved rocking up at Tesla Cardiff showroom in the transit van and plugging in and charging up. So it's good fun. But the one thing that also taught me is, having done that in that van, all these people that say you can't get long distances, I did it in a van. So when I got back in my Polestar in Cornwall and started to come
Easy.
back up the country, it was a doddle. It's so
Yeah,
easy because I got so much more range in that. It was
yeah.
just, I felt invincible. So I love the electric car. My kids love the electric car. They go out and charge it up for me. So they're part of that experience as well. And as we said, my car's in for an MOT at the moment. I've been given a courtesy car and it's not electric. And it's just, I've got to use the brakes and there's no regen. And it's like, no.
I've been there. I was given a courtesy car, and I went from having my Tesla Model 3, and they put me in a Fiat 500. I was like, I'm not driving a Fiat 500. I've got all that space. And eventually they gave me a Tesla Model S, actually, which was really nice. But it's like, there's no way. I've got 2 kids, 2 car seats. I can't get a Fiat
Yep.
500.
Yep.
So I've definitely been there. So just in terms of what motivated you to go into an EV? Was it personal preference? Was it a business forced you into an EV? Like, what was the reason behind that?
I'd love to say it was a personal preference, and it was. But it was also you can't be a head of fleet at National Grid advocating EVs and then not drive one yourself
Yeah,
either. So
bit
it
of
was
both.
a bit of both.
And a big question for you: would you go back?
Oh, good God, no. Definitely not. No way, never, ever. And the more people I can get into EVs, the better. There is no way I'd go back to one of the diesel. There's no point.
This is a little bit off the cuff. What's your like top 3 reasons why you're in an EV? What's your top 3 loves of being in an EV?
So first one is convenience. So, which is a weird thing to say, I guess, when everybody talks about how inconvenient they are because of the charging. But put that into perspective. Well, it took me a year where I didn't have a home charger. Then I was trailing the cable over the fence. Then I eventually dug up bits of my garden and sorted out the space down by the garage and managed to get a home charger in. So, and now I've even managed to get on. So I wasn't even on a cheaper tariff at the time either. So there were all sorts of reasons why I was on the daytime tariff. But despite all that, it was still convenient. It's such a smooth ride, and I know you can say that in new cars, but actually just having driven a brand new petrol today, it's not smooth. It is nowhere near as smooth as
Sluggish, isn't
EV.
it?
So don't care what people say, the smoothness and refinement of the ride is just brilliant. And then, of course, you cannot ignore the fact that you've got that sustainability angle. So everybody will go on and on about they're not sustainable, but they are. And they are that next step, and they are better than what we've already got out there. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
I guess those are the 3 reasons, really.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. It's interesting when you speak about the charging, because we've just, in another interview that we've done that's come in, we've spoke about charging and what that looks like, and it's really easy to see that there's a lot of misconceptions, but yeah, I could talk about that all day. So we'll move on to our next point. So from your perspective, like, what's the most significant trends that you've seen within the EV space at the moment?
So it's an interesting one because in National Grid, I think rather the emerging trend is we talk about EV as a car, and it's the language shift that's coming out through that. So I don't get asked about when people come to me for company cars, they're automatically talking EVs. There's no differential anymore between the diesel, the ICE, and an EV. They talk company cars. The language is now just EVs. There's an expectation that that is what it is.
Yeah.
So we're always having to double check and just make sure there's a bit of clarity. In terms of trends, yeah, again, the drivers, they've just, there's that whole mental shift from them. So can I say this on a podcast? They've actually become pains again because they've become, I want an EV that's got this, and this, whereas before they just wanted any EV. It didn't make a difference because of the BIK benefit. Now they want, I need my ISOFIX seats again, I need to carry the dog, I need to carry this, and they want all the extras that they were arguing for before. So again, that shows me that there's a shift in attitude. They're not talking about all the challenges that they had before. They are there, they've adjusted, they know how to charge, they know where to go to do it all. They're into that next vehicle is, I want to improve what I've got already. How do I get either the bigger ranges, or actually I'm getting requests now for which vehicles have got bi-directional because I want to go camping.
Okay, wow, yeah.
So that's the trends that I'm starting to see the shift in. They're whether that's because we're just so far ahead of everybody else, but the conversations are all around the next level.
That's so great to hear. I mean, that's definitely that's not the norm. I don't feel, from my perspective, from what I've seen, that that's the norm. So that's definitely great to hear.
Obviously I've still got some people coming from ICE vehicles into EVs for the first time. So I do still get the, how do I charge? How do I do this? Where do I go? A little bit of range anxiety. But we did some unofficial studies and kind of went out to everybody that was now in their EV going, so how long did it take you to adjust? And it's within 3 weeks. They've all adjusted.
Yeah.
It's really quick. That first long trip when I went on a first long trip with a new guy on my team, and he joined us, and I'm in the Polestar, he's in the Tesla long range, so he's already got 100 miles extra than compared to me, and he was hopping up all the time, whereas I'm like, no, I don't need to, I can get there, it's fine, come on, let's go.
That's good, isn't
So
it? I mean, I think it's just a mind shift change, isn't it? Like people changing their mindsets and the way they look at it. Because I mean, it took me some adjusting. Like when I was in my petrol and diesel car, like if I had 40 miles, I was like, I'm fine. Whereas if I got 40 miles in my electric now, I'll charge it. Which, that's not a bad thing. It's just my mind shift has changed from having running on empty all the time to, I prioritize filling up my car so that I can go about. So it's just changing your mindset and your mind shift. I've been in an EV for 2.5, nearly 3 years now, and I absolutely love it. So, just on that, then, what would you say is the biggest challenge in the industry at the moment for EVs?
So I think for everyone, the biggest challenge is still the press. It's still the public perception. It's still the media. It's still the anti-electric brigade. It's all those that don't want to get out. And I think the challenge we've got, none of us are saying you must go into an EV. We're just saying get into a better tech vehicle. Whatever your next one is, get into a cleaner vehicle as you go forward. You don't have to do it tomorrow. You do it as and when you change your vehicle. So nobody's saying get rid of your existing vehicle. The problem we've got out in the media, or everyone's still saying they don't have the range. Well, if you've noticed, even the media aren't saying that anymore. They might use the odd John O'Groats to Land's End, that Cornwall holiday trip, or the trip up to Scotland somewhere else for something, but actually they're not using it as much as they used to, because even the press now realise these vehicles have significant ranges in them now. So if you notice, it's all gone more into the technical side of it, or it's all about the fires and they're trying to latch on to other things that are causing problems. Now it's all about the charging network, and they deliberately seem to go out and find the busiest motorway services they can, that's the busiest on any bank holiday, full stop, and go, look at these queues. And it's like, yeah, but all of us know that. We planned that and we wouldn't go in there anyway, kind of thing. So I think the biggest challenge for fleets is that press side of it. And the reason I say that, when you're still trying to convert people, because we're now on the cusp of that mass adoption. So you've got all your early adopters that want to do it, are keen to do it, and will put up the niggles. You've now got people coming in through the fleets that aren't rich. Let's get rid of that myth as well. These are normal employees with a company vehicle designed to do a job. So they're not rich. So they're coming up against the, how do I get into Tesco's and do that? How do I get somewhere else and do this? And they're working through that on the car side. So we're into that early mass adoption. It has to be easy. The language has to be understood. We need to sort out the charging infrastructure in terms of the payment side of things, and all that's coming through. Where we all used to have 20 odd apps or whatever it was on the phone, one card or a couple of cards. How do you make that work a little bit easier? So that's now being sorted out with the contactless and everything else. So there's the shift, but the biggest challenge still is that public perception bit, because it makes it harder. And the fact that the government rolled back on the 2030 to 2035 just makes the second-hand market more difficult. It makes the retail side of things harder. Corporates are still going to carry on because they've got other targets, and they'll continue. And then as you come into the commercial vehicles, again, you've got a tougher job, because if you're a branded commercial vehicle and you park in Tesco's to charge, for example, or you park anywhere on a public infrastructure to charge, then the car users think you shouldn't be there because they think you should be at a depot charging. There's this public perception that a commercial should not be using the public charger, and it's getting over that, because people forget a lot of these commercial vehicles, actually, you've got painters and decorators, they're owner drivers, there aren't depots anymore, and they used to happily pull into the petrol station and fill up. So why can't they go into a public charger and fill up? So
Yeah.
those are the challenges we're seeing now. It's those that haven't understood how this is going to work.
I love that,
It's
Lorna. It's a very different perspective, and
mm,
you've brought a very different perspective on challenges. It's not by any means what I thought you was going to say, to be honest with you. And it's the first time I've really heard that challenge. And you're right. It's like completely like that didn't even cross my mind. So just with that being said, then what do you think is the most like um, exciting opportunity for EVs, for exciting opportunity for growth in EVs?
I think now that we're hitting that mass adoption, I still find it, when I go around the road and I'm commuting, it's seeing all those green number plates still.
Yeah.
It's just finding it fascinating everywhere. And everybody says there aren't any out there. It's like, there are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
loads.
They're everywhere. Everywhere you
And
look.
went camping in the summer holidays, and three of us all got together and we all pulled up in our EVs. So all the kids from across the campsite came over to talk to us.
Yeah.
What I like and what I see is exciting, um, is getting out to the schools now, getting out to the kids. They know more about this tech than some of the
Yeah,
parents do,
100%.
because they're being brought up with it, and they're in a space where, well, change just happens, doesn't it? I mean, I remember my kids, they're 13, they'll be 14 soon. But when they're about 7 and sitting in the back of a vehicle going, well, if diesel's so bad, why do we still keep using it? Their simplistic answer and view of life is such that they're happily charge those vehicles. They
Yeah.
already know how to do this. And my son, as a kid growing up who wanted a Toyota Supra, kind of went, I'm never going to drive a nice vehicle, am I? And I was like, probably not. But he's fine with it. So he just went, can I have a Rimac Navara instead then, please, Mum? Kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, we'll do that then. So I think for me, the exciting trends are just seeing the differences coming through.
I love that.
We'll get there. There'll still be a challenge in the commercial side, but just seeing what comes next out of these,
Yeah.
seeing that bi-directional come in,
Yeah.
seeing how people can move this forwards.
Yeah. That's awesome. Like I've got two really young kids, 2 and 4, and for the most of all of my youngest life and for most of my oldest life, have had an EV, and we took them to this like kids city, kids Mania, whatever it was,
Mm,
where you've got a little police station, bakery, post office, petrol station, and my son pulls in this little car into the petrol station, puts the fuel in the fuel nozzle, whatever it is, in the
yeah,
car, and
yeah.
walks off. And I'm, where are you going? Well, he's like, I'm going to the coffee shop, Dad. And like the other parents were looking at me like, your kid's weird.
What?
But
Yeah,
all he's known, and like he doesn't know what petrol is, doesn't know what petrol station is. So he saw that as a charger. And I think,
yeah.
what you said about schools and that sort of thing, I think that's super exciting.
We had a bunch of kids come in to National Grid, and we were doing some talks and everything else, and they were late because there was snow. But the other reason they were late was they were waiting for one of the parents who'd got into their vehicle and just got it wrong. I'm not going to say what EV it was or anything else, but the twins then turned up and they were like, oh yeah, and they were so practical over it. It's like, it's all right, we just went to a different charger, charged up, and they were like, how come? And they were discussing between themselves, yeah, but how come it's like, yeah, there was a little bit extra in the battery, wasn't it? Which is why, even though it said 0, we were able to get to the charger still. They were so unfazed by any of the challenges out there. It was phenomenal. And then listen to some of the other kids. God, kids are too smart for their own goods. They really are when they're 11 years old. They were throwing challenges at us back about charging infrastructure in roads and whether you know, the catenary solutions that we've talked about.
Yeah.
They were asking, yeah, but what about arcing and what about this and what about that? And it's like, oh my God, it is so in their thought
They just
processes.
absorb everything, don't they? Like, and it's
It's
refreshing to
in
see
there.
them speak about something
Yeah.
that's and
Yeah.
they're genuinely excited about it as well. Like, they're excited about that technology.
And the bit that I think is going to be really interesting going forward is how do you sell these cars? Because these kids aren't growing up with 0 to 60. You know, they're not growing up with traditional sporty how you sell a car. We've actually got people growing up now with the practicalities of it, with the range of it, with the AC/DC, you know, what the input is, what
Yeah.
the output is, what that bit is. So
And I feel like safety ratings as well, right?
yeah,
Safety ratings of,
absolutely. All the
I never
safety
heard people
stuff,
speak about
the
them before. And now all of a sudden
mm,
electric vehicles, the safety ratings on the cars, because they're so high, everyone like raves about it, which is great.
the well-being side that comes out of it, the smoothness of that ride, the sound on it, whether you've got performance tires on it or not. So you're understanding that. So I think how you sell vehicles now, even in the second-hand side of it, and you guys will experience this an awful lot with what you do, needs to change.
Yeah.
We still, and I'm going to say this as a woman and upset everybody, we still traditionally sell vehicles to blokes.
Yeah.
And we still sell in the same way, which is the 0 to 60, how much performance you can get out of it. And we need to sell differently because over 50% of the drivers are women now, and we have to sell this
Yeah.
differently because we need to buy differently. If I'm
Yeah.
looking at my next electric car, I'm looking at its footprint size. And the reason I'm looking at its footprint size is none of us have got garages that fit modern cars anymore because they've all grown. I'm looking at its range and I'm looking at how fast it can charge. So whether the car is limited in itself, being based on whether it's a 400 or 800 volt architecture. So there's differences now in what we're looking at. So for the techie ones out there that still want the technical stuff, talk about architecture and voltage.
Yeah.
For everybody else, we just need to look at different ways of selling vehicles. And I think that is going to be the biggest thing going forward now.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I mean, something we looked at when I looked after my store was lifestyle selling. We sold, we did a lot of lifestyle selling
Hmm.
rather than trying to sell to. But sorry, I could talk about that again all day. But so just on that, then, if you've got someone coming to you, they've never been in an electric vehicle, being head of fleet, you might have someone come to you who's in a nice vehicle. You know, what advice would you give to them when they're looking to go into their first electric vehicle, or someone who's a friend and family looking to purchase their first electric vehicle? Like, what would be your advice?
First question is always, what do you use your car for predominantly? Where do you go? How often do you do it? So a lot of people come and think they need that. They'll try and buy a vehicle for that one long trip that they do. Or if they're always going into town a lot, it's like, fine, look for more of a city vehicle. You don't necessarily need the range. So it's trying to understand how they use the vehicle before you then go into the rest of the stuff. And then it's how many people are you traveling? You know, are you always taking dogs? Do you always have kit in it? It's that kind of thing. And then you kind of work your way down what is out there so that you can meet their needs. And then you give them advice on, right, can you charge at home? Okay, that's not a problem. You're going to want this instead. Or if you do, go this route. So it's just taking them through pretty much the same kind of stuff I would if they were asking me for a recommendation of any car. What do you use it for? Do you like upright seating positions? Do you like this? You know, is it SUV style you're after or saloon style you're after? What is it?
Yeah, great. I love that. And I think, specific questions really does help, because I feel like there's so much generic selling out there when it comes to cars. And I've seen it even with EVs. You go into some showrooms and the guys are so used to selling, the guys and girls are so used to selling like your big engines and your loud cars.
Yeah.
And, they're trying to sell the EV in the same way, rather than asking these specific questions. Because me, I'm an impulsive buyer. If you excite me, and if you excite me on it's something, it's
See,
like,
that's why you're in a Tesla.
well, probably. Probably, but I'm very like impulsive. Whereas some people, you've really got to sell it to that specific need in their life and really hone in on that need. So yeah, so just on the like your EV management, being looking after the fleet for a big fleet, 9,000 cars.
Hmm.
It's a lot. What would be like your strategic approach towards managing the EV fleet?
So what I did when I joined Grid is kind of looked to future, put a 10-year plan in place. That plan looked at when my replacement cycles were for each of my vehicles, cars through to I've got 1,400 4x4 vehicles, pickups, a load of HGVs as well. So I kind of looked at each of them, looked at what was out in the marketplace, looked at what was due in the marketplace, and did an entire plan for all of the different vehicle types. So I didn't beat myself up that I can't buy any 4x4s this year. So I'll just buy the next diesel version that I can, because there isn't a 4x4 exists that can tow the capacity that I need it to do. So why force something onto my drivers that just isn't going to work or doesn't even exist in the marketplace? So literally it was a decision point then. So we kind of got the basics of the planning. We knew roughly that we'd only get to 60% of our fleet by 2026. We're never going to get any more than that. So don't try for 100% in the next few years, because you're never going to achieve it. It's just not practical. Your HGVs, you're on a 7 minimum year life cycle. So why try to do anything too soon? So it, again, as we've always done, and I've often said, the fleet mantras have always been right vehicle, right job. We've also added in right fuel type at the right time. There's no point doing something too soon. Doesn't stop me trying a few things and having a look at a Monroe off-roader or having a look at something else, trialing a couple of hydrogen cars just to see what the tech is.
Yeah.
Doesn't stop you working with people, but you have a practical plan in place. And when you've got that plan and it's practical, i.e. you're not going to force an employee into a vehicle they're not going to like or it's not going to be ready for them, you actually get their buy-in. And that's the same principles, just selling to general public now. Don't force them into something if it's not going to work for them. I had a peer in the industry kind of drop a note out going, I've got this driver up in Scotland doing 40 odd thousand miles, no home charge, I can't do this. What do you recommend? There's a whole bunch of others that are saying, oh, I'll get this, get this. And I went, just get them the latest diesel. There's no point moving somebody yet when you're going to turn them against what you've got. Doesn't work. So that's kind of how we've adopted our approach all the way up at the moment as we're taking it through. It's being practical.
So just on that practical element, so I understand we have to be practical, we have to be realistic. So how do you make sure that whilst doing that, you're still meeting your operational needs and your your commitments, environmental commitments?
Yeah, so having had that plan in place, you mentioned, as I said, I drove that Transit high roof. I've driven a EV Varo van on the rally as well. I actually drive some of these vehicles myself, so I can understand what the problems are, what the challenges are. Some of those early ones, the seating position's not right for long-term stuff. So, okay, you put it into you change the jobs need. But the other thing you've got to be very aware of, especially on the commercial side, buying isn't just the driver behavior, it's the line manager, and it's all the way up the chain, because these vehicles, yes, it's just a different fuel type, and I could argue that, but actually there are some changes that need to happen. You can't always have Joe Bloggs putting his hand up going, I'll do the overtime, I'll do the overtime, I'll do the overtime, because actually that vehicle now has to stop.
Yeah.
Because the vehicle has now done too much work and has run out of charge. So it's always getting that balance and managing. Don't forget, we do emergency work as well. So it's making sure everyone in the organisation knows the change is happening, not just the driver that's going into the vehicle.
I love that. That's awesome. So I have another question for you then, just on terms of if someone is a brand new head of fleet for another company and they really needed some advice, you've got a substantial amount of vehicles, but they've got 1,500 vehicles on their fleet and they're looking to change that and transition that into electric or into being a more sustainable source. What advice would you give them if they've got zero experience of moving? They're used to looking after fleet, but they've got zero experience of moving it over to EVs and electric and gaining the buy-in from employees, and they don't have any electric on their fleet at the moment. What would be the advice you would give them?
So a whole bunch of things, and I can actually do a sales pitch now for the Association of Fleet Professionals that I work for. So contact people, talk to people. Whatever nobody can hold all the answers. So talk to everyone, get lots of experience from different people, because especially those in your same industry, because a lot of what your challenges will be industry specific. So reach out and don't be afraid to ask is the first thing. Have a plan. Get your plan in place, get it over the line, talk with your directors, whoever it is, because the whole buy-in has got to be everywhere.
Yep.
So have that plan. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I did a 10-year one. I looked at my replacement cycles. I got the buy-in at each of those levels. And you do all of that before you even start to buy your first vehicle. And don't forget the infrastructure. So you really need to consider, if you are a fleet, are you going to be charging at the depots? How are you going to sort this out? Because actually, as difficult as buying that first EV is, it's still going to be the easiest thing that fleet manager does, because getting that infrastructure in, finding the timelines, if you haven't got enough power at your site and you need to upgrade, or anything that you need to do, that whole learning curve into that, you have to remember, fleet managers aren't electrical engineers. They're having to become so. They're having to understand everything. You've got to work with your finance teams. You've got to work with your property teams. So get in there and get your advice from everywhere. Talk with your tax teams if you're big enough to do that, because they'll know what you can write off in tax. They'll know where some of the other allowances are. So basically have that plan, because if you've got that target in place, you just follow everything through as you're going through there. Start doing your myth busting, get your facts out there. So beg, borrow, and steal them from all sorts of other sources. There's plenty of stuff out there now. And as I said, don't be afraid to ask those questions. But whatever you do, take the first step. In all of that, take a step, even if it's one car, because that one car coming in gives you that experience then of what to do next. So don't be afraid to do those easy vehicles first. Don't be afraid to reach out. And the one person that says, I want, well, let them have, and then see how it works. Because you'll learn as you're doing it, but start somewhere.
That's great. Making the first step. The first step's the hardest, right? Once you've made that first step, it can hopefully snowball from there. But that's amazing. Thank you so much. I think
You're very welcome.
unless you have anything you want to add, anything else you want to share, any insights you want to share with us, I'm sure I know that you're full of wisdom. We spoke for a little while at the EV show. So if there's anything else you want to share with us.
No, I think it's just that, we are all in this together. So
Yeah, exactly that.
reach out and ask. There are plenty of people around that will help, and there is plenty of information there. And just don't believe anything you read in the press.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And yeah, I love the thing you just said there as well. Actually, we're all in this together, because I've spoken to so many people from so many different industries that we don't have to work against each other. The idea right now is we need to come together and put this education out there.
Yeah, I used to describe it as it's more of an obstacle course. It's not a sprint or a marathon, it's an obstacle course, and there's going to be bumps and hurdles along the way. And once you've overcome one, turn around and help the person behind you get over it as well.
Like a tough mudder. I'm going to use that, actually. I think that's a great analogy, actually, like an obstacle course. I definitely will use that. But thank you so much for jumping on with us. It means a lot. And yeah, we really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. If you ever need to chat again, just reach out.
I will do. Thank you so much. All the best.